What if I were to tell you that a website, web application, and landing page are all very different from one another? Because that is in fact the case. The differences between each of these comes down to what their intended purpose is. Often web developers and designers are unclear around what the purpose of each of these are. And because of that, they end up making poor design choices for each of these. That is why there's so many websites that aren't helping business owners bring in more revenue. Why there's so many landing pages that aren't getting enough conversions. And why there's so many web applications that turn into complete flops. Let's break down each of these to really understand the differences and how to successfully build each one. First, I'm going to go over the landing page. Since for a beginner web developer or web designer, this one is typically by far the most confusing. That's because the purpose behind it and how to achieve this purpose successfully is often unclear for someone who views this from a web development or web design perspective. They look at things like the landing page layout, spacing between the elements, so things like the breathability, the color scheme, the balance between the white space, the images, and text, how clean the design looks, the animations, and so on, just stuff like this. The problem is that they look at this from a design lens and completely miss the purpose behind the landing page. The landing page is built for one purpose and one purpose only: to sell. That's it. This is typically done by having a primary call to action, also known as a CTA, which is the one action the page is designed to get the user to take. This could be something like submitting an email to get a free download of some kind, purchasing a product, signing up for a free trial, subscribing to a software, booking a call, booking an appointment, and so forth. The idea is that each of these pages are designed to sell an offer of some kind. And it's important that the focus is on driving users towards the primary CTA and removing anything that distracts from achieving this goal. This means not having things like a navigation bar at the top, footer with links at the bottom, buttons that bring someone somewhere else on the site, or having links to things like social media accounts and so forth. Anything that brings someone away from the landing page. There should only be one thing the user can actually do on the page, and that is to execute the conversion action. Another important secondary purpose is to also track that conversion and to have further analytics on the page to know how well it's performing and what parts of the page may need further tweaking. Then, the way these tweaks are made is that a single change is tested through what's called an A/B test. For example, you'll have half the users going to a landing page with, let's say, one headline, and the other half going to a landing page with another headline that you're testing. Then the analytics and conversion tracking will tell you which headline is performing better. And then you end up using that headline. So that is going to now be the default. After that, you may do a test with another headline, or perhaps you'll test another element like a subheadline or an image or the color of the primary CTA button and so forth. The process of performing these A/B tests is what's known as conversion rate optimization, or CRO, and is an essential part of crafting a high converting landing page. Now, the part that web developers and designers tend to miss here is that the words on this page are by far the most important part of the page, and they tend to not look at it through this lens. They're usually too focused on design and overlook things like the words on the page. They treat words on the page like something that's just complementary to the design of the page, instead of being the most crucial part of the page. The part that's most responsible for whether a user takes on the primary call to action or just leaves the page. You can literally have one landing page that has nothing but text on it and a primary CTA, and another that is beautifully designed with all of the bells and whistles and both trying to sell the exact same thing. If the beautifully designed landing page doesn't have text that's written in a way to persuade a user to take the action that results in a sale, well, then it could get blown out of the water by the landing page that has nothing but text on it and a primary CTA, if that text better persuades a user to convert to the primary CTA. This was a mind-blowing revelation to me at one point in time, since I too was one of these developers that focused mostly on design and very little on the text. I wasn't seeing things through the right lens when it came to landing pages. I didn't know what factors were most important when it came to a landing page that converts users to take an action. As a result, when it came to the words on the landing page, this ended up being more of an afterthought than the primary focus for me. And because of this, my landing pages just never converted well. This would often leave me confused because I thought that what mattered most was for things to look clean and professional. I thought this was what moved the needle when it came to a user taking a desired action. But I didn't realize that I was looking at this completely wrong. I didn't fully understand the purpose of the landing page and what factors mattered most when constructing it. Here's an analogy to illustrate how most web developers and designers tend to build landing pages, and how I did too. Imagine there's two people tasked with building a car. The first designs and builds a Toyota, and the second designs and builds a Ferrari. The Ferrari looks 1,000 times cooler than the Toyota, but there's a catch. The second person didn't think to put an engine in the Ferrari they built. The car looks aesthetically incredible. Looks like the dream car, but you can't even turn it on and drive it. This makes it end up being more of a glorified art piece than a car. The first car, however, despite not looking as aesthetically pleasing, is able to turn on and drive. The first person understood that the purpose behind the car was for it to be able to drive you from point A to point B. And if the car looks really aesthetically cool, then that's a plus. The second person didn't understand the purpose. For them, the main purpose was to make the car look cool, which they definitely did. But they didn't realize that this isn't the main purpose behind the car. Who cares if it looks cool if it can't drive? First and foremost, I want the car to drive. If it looks cool, that's a bonus. And this is exactly where most web developers and designers just go completely wrong when building landing pages. They have the purpose of the landing page just all foggy and unclear, and they pretty much build the equivalent of a Ferrari without an engine. Sure, the landing pages they build might look aesthetically beautiful and have these amazing layouts, colors, and animations, but it doesn't mean that they are fulfilling their purpose. The purpose and how to achieve that purpose often gets lost. This purpose is to sell an offer. That is the purpose behind the landing page. And the most important part of the landing page that achieves this is the words on the page. The words are like the engine in the car. If the words are crafted effectively, then it's like having a powerful engine in your car. But if the words are crafted poorly, then it's like having a weak engine, or even worse, just no engine at all. The art of crafting words that persuade someone to take an action is known as copywriting. This is a completely separate skill from things like web development and web design. Copywriters are those that specialize in writing these words that persuade, and the words that they write, they refer to as sales copy. And this sales copy on a landing page is referred to as a sales letter. This isn't something I'll dive into, just want to broaden your perspective around what goes into building great landing pages. This is the missing link that web developers and designers tend to have and why they end up designing the equivalent of a Ferrari without an engine. They are often missing that the purpose behind the landing page is to convert a user to take an action, and that the way to achieve this is through a well-crafted sales letter. Not the design, not the layout, not the animations, but the sales letter. And this other stuff is just a bonus. It's not what moves the needle. That's why you can have one landing page with nothing but text and another that is beautifully designed. The beautifully designed landing page might perform far worse when it comes to fulfilling its purpose. Therefore, the best way to understand a landing page is that it is a page designed to convert a user to take an action that results in some form of a transaction. This transaction might be monetary, or it might be things like a download for a free resource in exchange for an email, registering for a webinar, booking an appointment, and so forth. And the way that this is achieved is by designing the landing page with the purpose in mind and designing the page around well-written sales copy. When sales copy is an afterthought, this again is when you end up with a landing page that's the equivalent of a Ferrari without an engine. This is why web developers and designers struggle so much with making effective landing pages, because they aren't looking at the purpose behind the landing page and what's required to achieve this purpose correctly. By having the purpose in mind and the tools required to achieve that purpose, you can better understand how to build these correctly. Next, I'm going to go into web applications. Here, the purpose is much different than that of a landing page. With the landing page, the purpose was to convert a user to take an action that results in some form of a transaction. And this was achieved through effective sales copy. But web applications are different. The purpose here instead is to effectively solve a problem. However, there is a hidden layer to web applications that web developers and designers often miss. With the landing pages, this hidden layer was copywriting, which is used to drive conversions to a sale. With web applications, there too is a hidden layer. This hidden layer is around the secondary purpose behind a web application. Most web developers and designers only see the first purpose, which is to effectively solve a problem. Then after that, they mainly focus on things like the user interface and user experience. But the secondary purpose that they don't see is that the web application needs to be designed in a way where users continue to come back and use it again and again. This is where you dive into the topic of behavioral design. Behavioral design is all about how to create habit-forming products. In other words, how to design a web application in a way where it becomes part of one's internal habits. And once this is achieved, they end up using your app again and again. If this is not achieved, then it becomes incredibly difficult for a web application to be successful. It costs money to host infrastructure and to operate a web application, and it needs to be profitable in order to continue to operate it. Designing the application through the lens of behavioral design is the best way to achieve this. If you can successfully design your app in a way where users will just continue to use it again and again, then it's much easier to be profitable. Because instead of going through tons of effort to get people to use your damn app, you simply have people use your app just out of simple habit. This, however, isn't easy to achieve, because it takes a while for habits to form. This means that you need to have systems in place that get users to continue to use your app until a habit loop is formed where eventually external means are no longer needed to get someone to use the app. There are many books written on behavioral design that show how to achieve this. A great one being Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products by Nir Eyal. This book goes into the Hooked model, which involves 4 stages that are required to build a habit-forming product. First, we have the trigger, then the action, followed by the variable reward, and finally the investment. Put simply, there needs to be some kind of trigger that leads into an action, and the trigger might be things like, let's say, boredom or loneliness, uncertainty, maybe feeling productive or fear of forgetting something, fear of not capturing a moment, and so on. Then the action entails opening and using the app in response to the trigger. If the trigger is boredom, for example, then the action might be opening something like Netflix and looking for a show to watch, or opening Twitch to watch some live streams, and so forth. Next, you have the variable reward, which has to do with there needing to be some form of variability when receiving the reward. For example, to easily understand this, if we take an app like Instagram, when you open the app, you'll have a newsfeed where there are posts that likely interest you, and these will always be something a little bit different. The key here is that it's always different. If there was no variability in the reward you receive, then the app wouldn't be effective in becoming part of a habit. This is because as humans, we seek something new. Then back to Instagram. If you scroll down, then there will always be something new popping up. If you like what you see, then scrolling down feels rewarding, and so you continue to scroll down. Then maybe the next thing isn't as rewarding, so you scroll down again because what comes next might be more rewarding. And this creates a sort of slot machine effect where you keep on scrolling hoping for a better and better reward. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, and this is often how you end up succumbing to the ever so dreaded doom scroll. Then an app like Netflix, same thing. Every time there's some different shows and movies popping up that may interest you. Or you open up Twitch and there's different streamers currently live to watch. And on top of this, there's variability further when you watch anything on either of these apps. However, a trigger, action, and variable reward isn't necessarily enough to create a habit-forming app. You also need the investment, which basically means having some form of investment in the app. which might be a monetary investment, or it might be an investment of things like time spent in the app, followers or subscribers gained in the app, people that you follow or subscribe to, the number of posts you created, and so on. The more invested you are in an app, the less likely you are to transition from using another similar app, even if that other app is technically better, because you've already invested so much that it just doesn't feel worth it. This is why when apps enter the scene to try and compete with a well-established habit-forming app, then it can be a massive uphill battle to try and get users to move from the other app to yours, even if yours is technically better. A perfect example of this is something like with Twitch. With this app, you have creators who've invested lots of time into the app, posting VODs, gaining followers, gaining paid subscribers, and generally having a user base that strictly finds them through that app. Then the users that watch live streamers too have investment into the app through having different creators that they follow and subscribe to. So when an app like Mixer entered the scene, it simply couldn't create traction. Twitch is a well-designed habit-forming app where users had too much investment already, and so it was difficult to get them to want to move to another app. The creators had lots of investment, as did the users that watched the live streams, and this ended up being too massive of an uphill battle to overcome, even when they paid top creators to stream exclusively on Mixer. This ultimately led Mixer to just be a total flop. That's the power of a habit-forming app. Web developers and designers often don't look at creating an app with this secondary purpose in mind. They're too focused on what the problem the app will solve, and then they focus mainly on things like the look and feel of the app. Then they also think in terms of this feature and that feature would be cool to have in the app and stuff like this. But what they're missing is being able to see the secondary purpose, which is essential for the success of the app. It's essential to look at incorporating this into apps you build, but also equally important when analyzing the competitive landscape. You can design an absolutely beautiful looking app with a great user experience that solves a problem really well. But if it's missing the habit forming piece, then it will be very difficult to have a consistent user base. And if you don't have a consistent user base, then it will be very difficult for the app to be successful. Again, when it comes to web applications, these you want to think of with two objectives in mind. First, you have solving the problem effectively, and second, you have being a habit-forming app. Then things like good user interface and user experience are a big bonus. The thing is, if an app solves a problem really well and is a habit-forming product, then it doesn't even have to look aesthetically nice to be highly successful. Don't believe me? Just look at something like Craigslist as an example of a relatively ugly app that's very successful because it solves a problem exceptionally well and it's a habit-forming app. Finally, let's look at websites. And when I say website, what I mean is like a traditional website with a navigation bar at the top and a bunch of pages throughout. And then also I want to make it clear that there are some websites that fall in line with this sort of pattern. I'd consider it to be more of a web application than a website. An example would be something like a website for a weather company, let's say. Technically, you could still call something like this a website, but I think of this as more of a web application since it's directly solving a problem, which is providing you with weather information. With that caveat, let's get into traditional websites. So far, we looked at the landing page and understand that the purpose behind the landing page is to convert a user to take an action, which involves accepting some sort of offer. And we looked at web applications where the purpose behind these is to solve some sort of problem, where the problem might even be things like, let's say, boredom, and the solution might be some sort of entertainment. And where the secondary purpose is for the app to be a habit-forming product through principles of behavioral design. This now leads to the website. What's the purpose behind a website? When it comes to business success, a website, I believe, actually is the least important compared to the web application and the landing page. I'd even argue that a business doesn't need a website to be successful. The purpose behind a website, in my eyes, is for it to be a hub that gets users to enter different sales funnels. What's a sales funnel, you might ask? It is simply a sequence of landing pages that are logically designed to help bring a user down a sales path that is likely to generate far more profit. And on top of this, it often involves external factors to help bring users further and further down the sales funnel. You can think of the first landing page as being the first step in the sales funnel, the second page being the second step, and so forth. Then you might have things like emails and ads that are part of the sales funnel process, and they help bring someone further and further down the funnel. An example of this might be where the first step like in the sales funnel, might be a simple landing page designed to get someone to, say, register for a webinar. Then the next step after this might be to get someone to actually attend the webinar, which involves all sorts of reminders through emails and possibly ads. And then finally, the last step might be a sales page that gets someone to buy an offer, or it might be a page that gets someone to, say, book a call. And if they didn't attend the webinar, then there would be another component of the funnel that gets the user to watch a replay of the webinar. And then from there, you get to the final step, which is either the sale or the booked call. Another example might be a sales page where someone is perhaps selling a golf set. Then after they buy it, then there might be an upsell. So maybe it might be something like buying a golf bag. And then there would be like another upsell to do something like private golf lessons. But anyway, back to the website. So the website is really the central hub that brings users to these sales funnels. There's also different tiers of sales funnels. There's those that are meant to be kind of more at the top, which are gathering information. This would be lead generation. And then there's those that might sell a cheaper offer. So something like a book where you cover the shipping and the book's free, or it might be something like a challenge funnel. And then there's sales funnels for more expensive offers. And these might be funnels where you, let's say, watch a webinar or a video sales letter. And then you also have those for like the most expensive offers, which pretty much are trying to get someone on the phone to sell that offer. The overall idea then is for these sales funnels to further funnel people up to higher tier sales funnels that sell more expensive offers. That's pretty much the idea. People usually start off by going through the lead generation funnels, then a percentage of those people will go through the funnel a higher tier up, and then a percentage of those will go through a funnel at a higher tier from that, and so forth. And the website, again, is there as a central hub to get someone intrigued by an offer and then to go down one of these sales funnels. That's really it. So really, the website itself isn't doing any selling. The sales funnels and the landing pages within them are. And they are simply selling offers where one of these offers might even be something like a subscription to a web application, which means a web application is really a product that is part of an offer at the end of the day. This is why I don't see websites as being essential for a business. As long as you can get people into a sales funnel and sell an offer where that offer might even entail something like a free 14-day subscription to your web application, for example, then you don't really need a website. The problem I see is that with web developers and designers, they're often obsessed with websites, even though they're the least useful thing you can build compared to web applications and landing pages. It doesn't mean that they don't have their place. It is still useful to have a central hub to get people to enter different sales funnels, but it isn't necessarily required, and that's my point. And it also isn't useful without good sales funnels and landing pages within them doing the heavy lifting of selling. A website in my eyes is more of a nice to have, but not something you necessarily need. The main reason why there's a belief around needing a website is that people have been conditioned into thinking that they need one when they start a business. It's similar to something like a business card, where when someone starts a business, they think they need a business card. The business card, however, doesn't dictate in the slightest whether the business will be successful or not. A business can be very successful without ever having business cards. The business cards themselves play almost no role in the success of a business. It's one of these things that was conditioned into people, where when they start a business, they think things like, oh, I need business cards, I need a website. But this is simply not true. Another use for a website could be if you write, let's say, blog articles and you're posting them directly on your website. And ideally, you'd want these blog articles to drive traffic and bring that traffic into a sales funnel that's designed for, let's say, generating leads. In other words, a website could also be useful with a content strategy behind it. However, a website also isn't strictly required for this, since there's technically apps where you can create, let's say, blog post articles. Therefore, the purpose behind the website is really to be a central hub for different sales funnels and possibly be a hub that contains blog article content as well as to drive traffic to the website. In my opinion, it's the least important purpose when comparing a website, web application, and landing page. But it can still have its place and be useful. I mainly don't think it's as useful since the website isn't solving a pressing problem, and it's not the engine behind sales, both of which I consider to be a more impactful purpose. The website is mostly navigating people into a sales funnel, which itself has a purpose of acquiring a certain sales objective, which is done through a sequence of landing pages, each of which has sales copy designed to produce a certain conversion action. The important thing here is that it's the sales funnel and the landing pages that are doing the selling, not the website. This is a trap that a lot of web developers and designers fall into. They put their focus into traditional websites, thinking that they're the thing that move the needle and get results for a business. They put in tons of effort into building out all these different pages, making all these sleek and aesthetic designs, making everything look professional. When in reality, it would have been actually more effective to simply just make a well-crafted landing page. This one page is infinitely more effective at getting results than a traditional website with 50 or more pages on it. This is sometimes a tough pill to swallow, and I get it. I too was at one point a beginner web developer and was obsessed with making these beautifully designed websites. But I had to come to terms with the fact that I had an emotional attachment to building beautifully designed traditional websites instead of what is actually effective. This came with understanding the purpose behind each of these things and being able to objectively see the difference between these things and properly weigh the importance of each. Often as web developers and designers, we can be hyper fixated on viewing things through a certain lens. Viewing things from a lens of how to engineer things in a clean and reusable way. Building things with the latest and greatest technologies. Implementing complex features. How to create great layout, user interfaces, and user experiences. How to create an aesthetically beautiful design. And often we overlook the purpose behind what we're trying to actually build and the weight behind things that are required to fulfill that purpose. But when we can see things clearly, we can also build with clarity. It's the lack of clarity that leads to there being so many websites online that aren't helping a business drive more revenue. There's so many landing pages not converting users to take an action, and why there's so many unsuccessful web applications. By seeing these things through the correct lens and having the correct purpose in mind before building something, then you can actually build each of these things successfully. When you build a landing page without understanding the main objective being to sell an offer and copywriting being the primary skill to do so, then the landing page simply won't convert. When you build a web application without understanding that the main objective is being to solve a problem effectively and the secondary objective being to use behavioral design to build a habit-forming app, then the app most likely won't succeed. And when you build a website without understanding the main objective being to simply build a central hub that leads users into different sales funnels, then the website won't be all that helpful. Especially if you have the purpose all wrong by thinking that a traditional website is there to sell. It's not. That's what the sales funnels and landing pages are for. Hopefully now you have full clarity on the difference between a website, web application, and landing page. And now with this clarity, you should be able to build each of these successfully. You will have the correct purpose in mind when building each of these, and now won't be doing the equivalent of building a Ferrari without an engine. Then to recap, remember, the purpose behind the landing page is to convert a user to take an action that comes from them accepting an offer that the landing page is trying to sell through some form of transaction, which could even be exchanging an email for something free. This is still considered a transaction, even though it's free. This is done by crafting an effective sales letter using the skill of copywriting, which is the skill of writing words that persuade. Further, the landing page needs to have proper analytics and conversion tracking to properly perform conversion rate optimization, or CRO for short, so that tweaks can be tested and implemented if they convert better. The main purpose behind the web application is to solve some sort of problem, which might even be boredom solved through, let's say, entertainment that the app provides. And the secondary purpose is building the web application through the lens of behavioral design in order for it to be a habit-forming app. The purpose behind a website is for it to serve as a central hub to navigate users to various sales funnels that then do the selling for various offers. And part of the central hub may also include things like hosting, let's say, blog article content, which is used to drive traffic to the website through search engine optimization, or SEO for short. And also note that a sales funnel is also technically a website, but it is built in a way that's more effective at driving conversions and designed to bring in far more profit than a website built the traditional way. It's simply a website built in a specific way, like a web application 2 technically is just a website built in a specific way. Now, by understanding the differences between a website, web application, and landing page, and having a deep understanding behind the purpose of each, you should now be able to plan and build each of these far better. Granted, if you want to build some of these successfully, it may require diving deep into some of these topics that I briefly outlined. For example, building a successful landing page may require diving deep into things like marketing, copywriting, and sales funnels. And building successful web applications may require diving deep into things like business opportunities and behavioral design. However, this at the very least should give you a good understanding and a higher perspective of what's required to build each of these successfully. Now, before you go, make sure to smash that like button, obliterate the subscribe button, and until next time, I'll see you later. Thank you for watching. Bye.